this issue. This meeting comes at a very important moment, and the entire process that begins here and extends to the special summit at the UN General Assembly in September, continues through next March, when nations will speak and express their ambitions and outline their commitments, and then, of course, in Paris in December of 2015. And to John Ash, I will say, you mentioned the process that has gone on thus far. There is a famous poet in my country, long since deceased, Wallace Stevens, who once wrote the lines, "After the last no comes a yes. And on that yes, the future of the world depends." There were many no's that confronted those who have sought to address every significant challenge in our world. And after all the no's, there will be a yes. I bring you good news here today. Actions are already being taken. The business community is moving swiftly. The investor community is moving. Many regional and local governments are moving. Some national governments are moving. We are going to prevail. The only question is, how long will it take to prevail? The working sessions here are extremely valuable, and I would like to say to the ministers who have come here, it's extremely important that the work be productive here in all of these sessions. Energy efficiency, lighting, motors, alternative energy, sustainable agriculture, sustainable forestry, acting on the short-lived pollutants where we can have action, finance, where I will be spending a lot of my time over the next 2 days. But I want to address two questions in these opening remarks. There are really only two questions the world has to answer in order to solve the climate crisis. The first is, do we really have to do this? We've had 150 years of carbon-based energy. It's been a long, good run. Do we really have to do this? And the answer is very obviously yes. And I'm going to show you some pictures that illustrate why that answer is yes. But the second question is even more important. The second question is, can we do this? When we decide to really face this challenge, can we solve it? And I have good news to share with you on that question. Private investment, by the way, for all the talk about aid flows that have paralyzed such progress for so long, the private investment flows that are being unlocked as we begin to make this low-carbon transition are 1,000 times greater than all of the government funds that anyone has ever discussed. So let me show you a few pictures. First of all, we just entered the month of May. Last month, April, was the first month not only in human history, but for millions of years, that the level of CO2 in the atmosphere was above 400 parts per million. Last year was the first time it ever exceeded that level. Last month was the first time it exceeded that level for an entire month. This, of course, is the subject of discussion today. This is why the Earth system is vulnerable to the gaseous pollution that we are putting into the atmosphere. This is so thin. We are using this as an open sewer. We are dumping 90 million tons of heat-trapping pollution into it every 24 hours. And we have to stop doing that. The sources of all this global warming pollution will be discussed in the working sessions. Of course, we'll be hearing a lot about the burning of carbon-based fuels, but it's also industrial agriculture and factory farming and transportation and inefficient buildings and cities that are poorly designed and the burning of forests. But the main part of the problem, and the one that we must address in order to find solutions for all the rest, is the fact that 85% of all the energy we use on Earth is coming from carbon-based fuels. We didn't realize we were going to cause this problem when we started tapping this energy, but we did. So as CO2 increases, so does the temperature. 2,000 years of CO2, 2,000 years of temperature. This is well understood. And as a result, we have seen a steady buildup of heat in the Earth's atmosphere and in the Earth's oceans. And in the last several decades, the process has accelerated quite dramatically. And I will show you that in just a moment. But starting in the 90s and then in the 2000s, we have seen the buildup of heat. 13 of the 14 hottest years ever measured have been in this century, and it's 2014. These are the 12 hottest years on record. Last year was the 37th year in a row warmer than the 20th century average. Last month was the 350th month in a row warmer than the 20th century average. Now this may look complicated, but it is really not that complicated. I'm not good at statistics, but it's fairly simple. The scientists have measured the temperature of the entire Earth in small blocks. And they took the 30 years that began the second half of the 20th century, 1951 to 1980, and said, let's make that normal and see what's happened. And as you see, the white represents normal days, normal temperature. Blue is cooler than normal. Red is warmer than normal. In the 1980s, everything shifted toward warmer than normal. And all of a sudden, we get these extremely hot days on the lower right. In the 1990s, it continued to shift. We still get cold days, but the average is shifting quite dramatically. And in the last decade, the warmer than average days are dominant. And all of a sudden, the extremely hot days on the lower right are more numerous than cooler than average days. In fact, these extreme heat events are now 100 times more common than they were just 30 years ago. And that is what is causing the disruption of the water cycle and the extreme weather events. Most of the energy is trapped in the oceans and atmosphere. But if you look at all of it together, the cumulative amount of man-made global warming pollution is now trapping as much extra heat energy every day as would be released by 400,000 Hiroshima atomic bombs being exploded every 24 hours. It is a big planet we live on, but that is a lot of energy, 400,000 times every single day. The ocean absorbs the vast majority of it, and so ocean-based storms are stronger. Super Typhoon Haiyan, when it came across the Pacific Ocean headed toward the Philippines, crossed a section of the Pacific that was 3 degrees Celsius warmer than normal. What was the result? Well, you know, the strongest typhoon ever to hit land. The devastation was heart-wrenching. And this morning, as we meet here, there are still 4.1 million homeless refugees in the Philippines. We talk about adaptation, and we do have to adapt. Resilience, and we do have to find resilience. There are many countries that are not able to recover so easily from these events that we are making so much more destructive and so much more common. In my country, John Ash referred to Super Hurricane Sandy. The Atlantic Ocean, just to the windward of Manhattan and New Jersey, was 5 degrees centigrade warmer than normal when Hurricane Sandy hit. And of course, the results are well known. Even the Ground Zero site.
The Hudson River, downtown Manhattan, was literally pouring into the Ground Zero.
People said that could not happen. But it did happen. And the land-based storms are also much stronger. Why? Because the warmer oceans not only drives stronger storms, as the temperature of the oceans increases, much more water vapor is put into the sky, and the warmer air holds more water vapor. For each 1 degree Celsius increase, there is a 7% increase in the amount of water vapor. Already, just in 30 years, we've seen a 4% increase in average humidity worldwide. So when these storms form, they release much more water. Warmer temperatures, much more heavy precipitation days. That's why the downpours are getting bigger and the floods are getting stronger and more destructive. Like what happened in Pakistan less than 4 years ago. 20 million people rendered homeless, further destabilizing and hurting a country that is a great country and nuclear armed. India last year, I could show you thousands of such slides. Central Europe, the strongest floods measured in at least 500 years. Yesterday, 2 days ago, in Afghanistan, and the relief workers have told us they fear that 2,500 people were killed because these heavy downpours caused mudslides. We had one in my country just a couple of weeks ago. The aid workers have said that in the last 7 days, more Afghans have been killed in these events than all of those killed in the war during 2013. This was 3 days ago in my country in Florida. 61 centimeters of rain in 26 hours. This is not normal. We have seen such events all around the world.
There's no one in there. Oh my God.
The same storm traveled up the east coast of the U.S. and saturated the city of Baltimore. Sorry. There it is. Just 2 days ago, these events are occurring all over the world. And the same extra heat that is putting all of the extra water vapor into the sky is pulling it out of the soil and creating deeper and longer droughts, threatening our food system. In China a few years ago, we saw a devastating drought that did this to the largest lake in China. We have seen the East Africa drought worsened by these same factors and the tragic consequences. In Syria, many do not realize the role that climate-related drought has played in Syria. This is one farmer, but the country as a whole has lost 60% of its farms during the drought between 2006 and 2010. 80% of the cattle, 1 million refugees driven from farms into the cities where they collided with another million refugees from the Iraq War. And the social and cultural and ethnic and religious combustion that occurred was warned about by the government of Syria years ago. How many governments can survive the extra stresses that come from the climate crisis? This is 2 months ago, 3 months ago in Brazil. It is still ongoing. This is last month in Colombia. I was just at a climate conference there 2 weeks ago. In Brazil, the reservoirs. In my country, the biggest agricultural state of California, 100% of it is in drought, 25% exceptional drought. The reservoirs are drying up. And of course, with drought comes fire. You may remember what happened in Russia less than 4 years ago. The largest drought and the largest fires in history. And then 4 months later, Russia, Ukraine, and Kazakhstan took all of their grain off the world markets. And as a result, food prices hit the second all-time high in less than 3 years. And there were food riots in dozens of countries around the world. The cost of carbon is adding up. Instability, drought, potential threats to our food supply, climate refugees, all of the rest that you see there, sea level rise. We cannot continue ignoring this. We must face it. We face a moment of decision. That, Mr. Secretary General, is why this ascent, this Abu Dhabi ascent, is so crucial. Now, here is the good news. The scientific establishment is virtually unanimous. The last year, 99.99% of all the peer-reviewed papers, all of the academies of science on the planet agree their joint statement. The evidence is indisputable. The need for urgent action is indisputable. We have the solutions at hand, and they are coming along much faster than anyone expected them to. A wise man once said, things take longer to happen than you think they will, and then they happen much more quickly than you thought they could. That's where we are on renewable energy. Already there are 79 countries that have reached grid parity with photovoltaic solar energy. Here was the projection 12 years ago that the world would have 1 gigawatt per year of photovoltaic energy by 2010. Well, 2010 came around, and actually we exceeded that projection by 17 times. Last year we exceeded that projection by 39 times. This year we will exceed that projection by 54 times. This is an exponential curve. We've seen it before. We saw it with computer chips. This is world solar photovoltaic production. It is going up so rapidly, it is quite amazing. This is by country. And of course we have seen this all over the world, particularly in China. But the rest of the world, all over the world, this is happening. So here is another analogy, not computer chips, but mobile phones. I remember those first big clunky mobile phones. AT&T did a massive study in 1980 and predicted that by the year 2000, they could sell almost 1 million of them. Well, in the year 2000, actually, they were a little bit off, 120 times off. This year, there are 6.3 billion mobile phone connections. So the answer is, why were they not only wrong, why were they way wrong? I think there are 4 parts to the answer. Number 1, the cost dropped much faster than anyone expected. The quality went up at the same time. Individuals made the decisions on purchasing. And the developing and emerging countries did not have existing landline telephone grids, so they leapfrogged. That's happening now. A lot of developing countries don't have very good landline electricity structures. Look at what is happening in so many parts of the world. This is an unstoppable revolution. New business models are appearing. New financing arrangements are appearing. We are seeing the costs continue to come down an average of 15% every single year. This is unstoppable. This is the poorest country in the world, where children are connecting to digital learning with photovoltaic power. These are the countries, as of this year, that have already reached grid parity. And within 6 years, more than 80% of all the people on planet Earth will have access to photovoltaic electricity equal to or cheaper than the grid average price. And it will continue to spread from there. Some countries like Morocco have already signaled an even higher ambition to sell solar electricity to others. I hope that in the sessions here in Abu Dhabi, there will be a great deal of ambition and far more action on this. I learned from one Gore, my dear deceased friend, and she said, as many of you have heard, if you want to go quickly, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. We need to go far quickly, and that's why this ascent here in Abu Dhabi is so crucial. So in closing, I started with 2 questions. Do we have to do it? Yes. Can we do it? Yes. I'd like to close with 2 other questions, one of which will be asked by the next generation not too long from now. If they live in a world with worse floods, deeper droughts, collapsing governance in countries that are damaged by this, with hundreds of millions of climate refugees and diseases spreading into new niches and sea level rising, they would be justified in looking back at us and asking, what were you thinking? Why didn't you act? But if they live in a world with hope and optimism, a world of renewable, of hope with renewable energy, renewed governance structures, with reform, if they see solar and wind and efficiency, and if they look at their own children and feel in their hearts that their lives are going to be better still, I want them to look back at us and ask, how did you find the moral courage to rise and confront this crisis? And part of the answer will be the ascent in Abu Dhabi and the special session this September and the Paris negotiation in 2015. Always remember, political will is itself a renewable resource. Thank you.